Okay, it's recording now.
Okay. I
Um,
don't remember what we were about, but what did you want to talk about now?
well, you had said something that I was like, yes, that. And I think it was, oh, I think it was when you were like, wait, what was it? It was like you were saying something about punching.
Like,
You were like,
you're not a bad person if you punch someone, and punching someone isn't about being bad or good. Making the choice to punch someone, and
yes.
that, that's how behaviors work. And so you can't be like, oh well, I am this way. Therefore, when people react to me, I'm allowed to do X. Like, you can't be like, I'm a trans person, so if someone looks at me, I'm allowed to decide they're a transphobe, and the whole reason they don't like me is because they don't like trans people. But that's not true. Maybe you just have a shitty attitude. Or, maybe just that day, like, because it's like, I, as a trans person, meet trans women specifically, not because there aren't a lot of trans dudes, but because trans dudes just lay low and tend to not be, like, I don't know, out here trying to be seen, which is a whole different thing. But like, they're specific, because it's also like, I understand that like trans women do get literally the shit end of every stick. Like, that's facts, particularly black trans women. But there's a certain category of like white and light skinned non-black trans femme that like needs to be the like hyper femme, hyper person, and they always feel as if their everything hooks on like being perceived as like a hyper femme person. So it's hard then when they do stuff and it's like, okay, it's not that it's not work. It's that something about your personality just makes people not want to be around you. And it's not about being trans or being femme or being seen or not seen. That's about like the actual energy that you are radiating and that people are perceiving. And then like how they view your actions with the preface of that energy, right? Because there's like, first impressions are everything, but your first impression with someone isn't the first time you meet them, if that makes sense. Like, all the time. It could be sometimes if it's literally the first time you're ever meeting them, but especially like when you start networking, you realize like your first impression of me could be something I don't even remember, and that could then color every single thing for the rest of eternity. So who are you to tell me, or who am I to tell you what perceived light I'm judging you by? Unless it's obvious. Like, there is obvious transphobia and like racism and homophobia. But that is extremely like explicit. It's like people, like, you ask for help and people don't talk to you, or they don't approach you, or they look at you and look away and keep looking away and like are obviously observing you as an object or as a display instead of treating you like a person. It's like people looking at you and doing a double take because like you're wearing a fucking nasty face, or like because you're doing something weird, or like, sometimes it looks in the grocery store all the time. I like probably smell loud as fuck because I can't go to the grocery store sober. But it's scary, right? Like, that doesn't mean that they're fucking homophobic or like racist. It just means that it's obvious. Like, there's all sorts of reasons people could be looking at you, and sometimes white people, especially in the north, are fucking judgmental as hell. So like, they could be fine. Like, it doesn't, just because they look at you also is one thing. Oh my god, and something I think about all the time is like, when people look at you and it's like, okay, well, if you're gonna wear the makeup, people are gonna look at you because everyone has their fucking mother has an opinion about whoever's wearing makeup. If it's done up, they're gonna judge you because you look like whatever, a whore, because you look racy, because you look like a clown, whatever they want to say. If your makeup is bad, someone's just gonna come at you. Someone has to come up and tell you it's bad, right? Like, if it's something, if it's something like, if it's your whole look and it's just trash, then no one's gonna say anything. You just have to wear that. But like, if you have lipstick on your teeth, someone might just be like, "Hey, I noticed you have lipstick on your teeth." Like, I was admiring your look, and I noticed you have lipstick on your teeth. Like, telling you something. I think that's the problem. Is like it's the communication where there's like you're just leaving the space to like be miscommunicating.
Oh my God, I feel like you brought up so many things I want to talk about.
Pick
Okay,
one.
like one thing is like, okay, like one thing is in the beginning. So like I can't totally, I mean, I guess I can't totally speak to a trans femme experience, except that I tried to be femme for a long time. I mean, and I am still like a
Right.
little
Okay.
femme.
Actually, can we both? I think we let's just as a bookmark. We should both talk about this because I'm also not a trans fan in terms of what that is to people as a label. But we can talk about that later. I feel like I should write that down.
Oh yeah, we should take notes. Wait, there's like a note feature in here or something. Oh wait, it's called chat. Okay. Trans
I should open a
femme.
whiteboard.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I don't really know what it is, but I was afraid to click on it. Open a
Wait,
jam. Well, okay, so like one thing I think about is how like what is this experience? Okay, so like okay, how do I break this down into parts that make sense? Like gender is a construct that affects everyone and harms everyone, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
I feel pretty, And then and it's also a concept. It's an institution. Like gender doesn't do things. People do things. People do things by wielding gender and wielding that like idea and framework in order to, especially when it's like a normalized framework, in order to kind of like do like a power over a situation or like a this is what's normal and I'm wielding it as normal. And so like and I think that like when you're an individual and you can hold and you can kind of cling to these frameworks like gender because they benefit you, if you're trans and you're like, oh my God, I feel so unsafe because besides all the reasons to feel unsafe as a trans person, but also like maybe at the very like core of that is like, I feel unsafe because I don't fit into a framework anymore. And so if the only way for me to feel safe is to fit into a framework, this is like that energy that I feel like you're talking about. Like it's not the energy of being trans. It's the energy of do I feel the need to cling on to identity in order to feel safe? And I feel like that's what you're talking to, where it's like yes, like I mean, it's a funny thing because I definitely feel like, wow, like I really wish I could like pass as one of the boys, but I feel like I felt that my whole life is like I don't really understand why I don't. But at the same time, like so few of my guy friends like wear makeup and like care about their eyebrows. And like I'm also
Right.
like I feel I care about those things and like I also know that that sets us apart or whatever. And so I don't know. I guess I kind of just I don't know why this is even relevant, but yeah, I feel like there's this like a movement to the clinging of a certain identity, and not only that, but like when you cling to that identity, identity is so volatile and it's also never something, to my understanding, that's actually inside of you. Like identity is like the rubber gloves that we put on to interact with like the conditional world. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trans inside. It's not like there's a trans inside of me. You know what I mean? Trans is like the experience of like when I'm trying to act out of my nature and it grates against this like outer framework to me. Like trans like is what comes out of that. Like that's what we like name that or whatever. And so like
Well, it's like
when
yeah, it's
mhm.
almost like to to be that person because I do love comparatives and analogies. Like if one were to take like if you're making if one were to be a cook and make society and then you and you're like it's a dish of your creation so you're just putting in how you like whatever you are this is what you are putting into society trans is something you would like this is a carrot and here's a grater and like you want to just put trans in as a and you know like you're making a soup or whatever but society is like no that's too much we can't it doesn't mesh well so you have to do these things to like make it sit well with us and you're like okay but I don't want to do that that's like a lot
Yeah, it's also like
I'd rather just like make the stock and put the whole carrot in.
Hmm. Oh my God, yeah. And it's also like trans only exists because of a binary gender like construct, right?
Right.
Like trans is not, and like if there was not bi, then there would, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Like if one label wasn't created, the all the other labels wouldn't have to have been created.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
like that's the other thing is like when did language change and why are they now labels when like they actually started as very clear like I don't know how to say it other than like class structures or like frameworks, oppression frameworks. Like they're literally just oppression frameworks. And so that's why I especially get frustrated with when people who identify as radicals also cling to identity politics so much is because it's like all of the identity politics that you're wanting to ism me with are literally oppression frameworks. And to like if you believe in abolition, you have to believe in abolishing the actual system that is white supremacy, which means getting rid of labels like leftist or being a socialist or being like a fucking like trans, cis, whatever the fuck it is, like whatever your thing is, like, cool, you have a PhD. I don't care if you're a doctor. If like when it comes down to it, you don't know how to have my back. Like that doesn't matter. The framework of society and reality.
Okay, I think you're touching on something that I really want to talk about because,
Okay.
oh yeah,
Sorry, I'm just like adjusting myself
okay, I'll
as
keep talking.
a injured person. Yes, continue to talk. I'm just meeting my needs. I'm making my space accessible.
Okay. Um, oh, this is the first thing that comes to mind. So okay, so like one of the big issues, okay, one of the big things I think of
Hold
is
on.
how,
I mean,
mhm,
don't hold on. You can keep going, but I'm gonna get mittens. Come here.
Crinkle, is it you? Crinkle, are you here?
Yeah, but he doesn't want to come inside because I'm mad at him. Come inside.
He knows.
He does know
He,
because he's been bothering me. I'm like, I can't. It hurts me to like stand and move, but he always needs to be let in or let out, or like he wants to sniff around. He always wants to come in and eat food off the floor because I can't like, dishes anywhere else. I like his Oh my god.
Crinkle, hello.
Look who it is. Anyway, what were you saying?
Um, okay, the concept of queer was created as an anti-identity. So when people identify as queer, it is like
Yes.
going against like the whole point. The other thing is that like I think that like anytime you're talking about identity, you're talking about a thing that can be capitalized on. Do you know what I mean? Like we live in like a strange place. And we live in a strange place. But wait, let me return. There's
I mean, we
like
live in a society where social capital is such where being queer is now social capital.
that's also true. That's also true. Oh yeah, I was gonna talk about yeah, like oppression identities and how like so much of identity is like surrounded by the ways in which you're oppressed. And I think a lot about like if you create community around your pain,
Mm.
there's kind of like no incentive to get better. Do you know what I mean? So like I think about like ED, for instance. If you're in like a group of people who all suffer from like eating disorders, if you get better, then you no longer have access to this community because it's based around eating disorders. Do you know what I'm saying? But like if you
Right.
love bowling or something, I don't know, do people love bowling? Like then you go out and bowl together and like no matter what your pains or your joys or whatever are in life, if you're like doing what you love,
Right.
then like, those people can like be there for you or whatever. It's a weird thing to
Like the
compare like
continuation of rehabilitation community after one has been rehabilitated. Like, how do you keep, and like sobriety, like, because that's the only structure I've really interacted with in a way where like I had to go to like a group for it. Um, is structured in this way that like kind of has continued community aspect, but also kind of sets one up for failure because like you go to meetings, say you're sober for like your goal of X amount of years, months, days, whatever. The way you continue outside of a meeting is to like have a sponsor or have someone, or like they have you assess yourself and decide that you have enough community and enough confidence in yourself and your community that you can like step away from going to meetings and call your sponsor when you need them. But that just like all depends on you having that ability, your community being there to support you, being enough to support you being willing to call on them, your sponsor like having the time, not like backing out on you, not being sober themselves, or if they're having their own struggle with sobriety, like how are you going to help each other? Can they help you? Can you help them? Like, how are you going to navigate that? It just puts a lot of onus on the person who's already struggling with having an addiction or like getting through that addiction. So, like, why, first of all, why is AA the way that it is? Or like a lot of recovery things are based around like religion, or structured in ways that are clearly like favored for pretty privileged, thin privilege, like a lot of white supremacist privileges. And so, with that in mind, one can very easily cheat the system. Like, um, people who like go to private rehabilitation centers, celebrities, like constantly because they have the money to just be like, you know what, it got too public. I have to do something, so let me buy 30 days of sobriety and like go on my way, and we'll see where that we'll see where that goes, as opposed to someone who like literally is like, okay, I like got addicted to crack in the 80s, like had my kids, now my kids are addicted to crack, like, or whatever, like this has been a generational thing, and like we can't go to rehab because we're fucking broke, because we have generations of like addiction and absolutely no wealth accumulated. Like, what are you supposed to do with that when the whole system is like, get sober by yourself, go to meetings by yourself, like forge a community somewhere by yourself, and then get sober and continue on by yourself.
There's like this way that like getting help is constructed as you have to go find it outside of yourself. And like there are ways that I like definitely think that like you can't do everything on your own because I think you really do need perspective and other people. But there's also this like kind of strange way when people like, okay, so I was reading this book and it's from some decades ago. I think it's from like the late 60s or something. It's like a book on like kind of philosophy, psychology, blah blah whatever. And one of the things that it's talking about fascism, and it's talking about the way that like people say that they don't like fascism, but in their actions really support fascism. Because I mean that to live according to fascism means you can be helpless, and that someone else is totally in charge of what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's totally in charge of you. So that's like some religion is like that. You know, like I don't have any. This is how people treat astrology, which is what I hate. Like, oh, I don't have any free will. Like the stars are freaking telling me what to do, and like God forbid my Libra moon. You know, I'm just destined. I don't know. But I think it's also like the way that people deal with getting better is like I take no responsibility. I put myself in a helpless position. If you put yourself in a helpless position, no one can do anything for you. You can't do anything for you. No one can do anything for you. Like
Yes.
what, you know, and so there's this way that like getting better, you can't you can't like I mean, I don't even know what getting better means. Like, better than what? Like, I think like living more in alignment with yourself in a way that, like, you know, is more efficient in the long term with, you know, like just generating less resistance. I think that's what I would call like better or like health or something is like, how can I do something that I encounter the least resistance over time with myself, you know? Like, I'm not working this job that is going to kill me. 10 years or
Mm.
whatever. I don't know what people do. Um, but where was I going with that? Something about I oh, just like helplessness. Oh yeah, yeah, like if you're looking outside of yourself, I think it's okay to look outside of yourself to find help. But if you think that the outside is going to somehow fix you, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm going to go do this thing and then I'll go have this adventure. I'll go to this event, which doing anything is kind of like that. And then somehow it's going to change me. But you make zero lifestyle choices, changes. You like do not change your framework. There's no like internal like self, not just self-reflection, but just decision making. There's no decision making on your part to be like, oh, like I go from here to there. That's how it starts. Like what what other decisions could there be instead of this habit that I have of like, oh no, like go do this thing. Like what if I were to what else is there? Like, maybe I'll decide to like my favorite is like I'll decide to go for a walk. If I can walk, go for a walk. Or like roll around. Or I don't know, something like that. Like instead of doing this, why not like just do this one thing and see like what changes? I don't know. I feel like I talked myself into a circle. I don't
Like,
remember.
so, I mean, I was just waiting for you to like find. I don't know. It seemed like you had a solid point you were trying to make.
Fooled
But
ya.
well, but something that makes me think of though is like how um what did you say? See, this is why I'm so bad at like discussion panels is because I can never actually recall what someone said. I just remember it being like that. Oh yeah, like I want to echo that or something.
Yeah. Hmm.
Of like,
That's why I turn on closed captions
oh okay,
so I can see what they're saying and remember.
yeah. But you said something about helplessness and like
Yeah.
that perceived thing and how I feel like a lot of there's like a lot of dichotomy, which is bad. It's bad. I think actually having two choices because or feeling like you only have two choices or that there's only a right and a wrong because there's always a third option and that is often the option that you want. Like the third option is almost always the option you want to take. And then it's like you're living in the dichotomy and here's what you want to do, but you're told this is what you can do. So like where do you fall? And I feel like that is the problem is like society needs to be the this, but it's doing that.
Oh
And
my God.
people are
Yes.
like we're supposed to do the like finding of the point or like building like yeah, I guess if that's how you build a society is you start with this and you get to this. But there's like in this is the intellectual part and that is where I think a lot of societies crumble is where you have the ideologies that are in power and you have the people who want to get here but the way it looks is different and instead of joining the two sides they just want to like make a tower but that's not structurally sound.
Yeah, no, I call this thirddom. Thirddom. Like like kingdom, but thirddom. Like I think that's the change astrologically that needs to happen between 2020 and 2024. And I think that that's like when we're talking about trans, we're talking about thirddom. It's like when we're talking about queer, theoretically queer as a theory, not as an identity. We're talking about thirddom. And I think like there's this weird way that like this is yeah, like this is the dichotomy. This is the social this is the framework. And then sometimes things get introduced in the middle as like this third space, this third quality, this dynamic quality that kind of breaks this. But then each of these sides kind of just like takes it back. Where like, I don't know, like how you were saying about like queer being like social capital. You know what I mean? Like queer being an anti-identity is also being anti-capitalist. But then you take
Right,
it as a keyword and now you can make money off of certain platforms if you tag it as queer.
right, right.
That's
Or
so
like
weird.
also becomes such and like this is definitely something that the internet has achieved and like I mean it it was happening, but like it happens much faster with the internet. Is like information just appears and becomes mainstream, or like things become popular so much faster. So it's so much easier to capitalize on things. So like Pride becoming like literally just a like it's just a big ad parade. Pride is just a big ad parade, and then you go to like a gathering that has been funded and sponsored by businesses who want to sell you stuff. And that's who's like tabling at your local Pride events are like people who want to sell you stuff, and like maybe a few local initiatives like Tapestry or like wherever the condoms are, and then whatever queer sponsor there is in the area, and then it's just like a bunch of businesses. So it's like, how do you like what amount of gatekeeping do you allow with this kind of thing? This is something that is talked in these the video series I watch called The Grapevine TV, which is like just a black panel like discussion group, and they cast different panels like every couple of months or whatever, like a couple of times a month, and they talk about topics. And something that comes up in a few of them is gatekeeping, and in the black community, like who is allowed to gatekeep, and like what does that look like? Who does it? Who's allowed to actually do it? Like should we be doing more of it? Like the answer is yes, unanimously usually. And like how do you apply that in a reality where like at least in my ideal reality, like how do you apply that in a transformative justice setting of like see I want everyone to see like what the actual root issue is. I want us to discuss like all sides and then come to a compromise or decision about how we move forward. But in the getting there, we say, okay, like this side, you've made your argument, but as I identify with these actual things, I'm saying that you can't have this, this, and this as like your argument, right? Like if you have exhibit A, B, and C, I'm saying B and C don't count. I'm gatekeeping you. That's not really gonna like fly as you're shooting down someone's like lived experience or whatever they're presenting it as. But at the same time, if you have rank in those groups that they don't have, and you know that for a fact historically, of course that doesn't fucking matter. Because you pull rank and you have those experiences. Like if I'm in a if I'm in a restorative transformative situation with a dark skinned trans femme person, and my slight with that is like some bullshit, and exhibit A, B, and C is like I am black, I'm trans, and I am under 6 foot, whatever, right? I can't use I'm black and I'm trans as an excuse to like be shitty to this person because they're also black and trans. They're dark skinned, so they have it harder than me, and they're trans femme, so they have it harder than me because they're trying to fit into a smaller box than I am. And they have lived experience that I don't have because theirs is worse than mine. So like how do you we're reaching a point where once everyone is suited up with their identity, how do you fight? How do you fight someone who has your identity on? Because you're not supposed to be fighting is the whole point. The point is that you're supposed to be unified under these things, but we're at the point where it's like armor and we're fighting against each other. But gatekeeping is important. So how do you keep gatekeeping without it being a fight, and also without letting letting people wear things that aren't for them?
Yo, yeah. I think this kind of has to do with one of the things that was hard for me this or that you're talking to something that was anyway, maybe I'll talk about it. Like in answer to your question, like how do you gatekeep and how do you deal with this and how like I feel like my first response is like only speak to your own experiences. Like don't speak on behalf of other people and let other people speak to their experiences.
Right.
I feel like moving backwards from that, like, it's just so like because part of like what you're talking about like with the armoring up and stuff like that is because identity is capital, and so there's just like when you're playing oppression Olympics, when identity is capitalized upon, then the more kind of like oppressive identities that you can identify with, there's kind of like a greater, you have more weight in a certain sense. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you can pull like a certain, how do I say this?
Well, like I guess I'm wondering which identities you mean pull a certain weight. Like in what?
Sure.
Like do you mean we're playing on the grand on like the big picture playing field of like if I had the choice to choose between identities of like white and black, obviously I would choose white because they have power within the structure at this point? Or do we mean within the queer community, like there's a difference between being like cis and gay and trans and gay, and like therefore we're playing oppression Olympics, and because I'm trans and I'm gay, I win.
I guess the latter. Like when I'm thinking about the winning aspect and kind of um comparing I guess I see like a place for particularity or like a little bit of like finesse because like okay, like let's say you're like I'm trans and gay and you're cis and gay, so I win in some regard. That person's experience of being, both of our experiences of being gay though are probably going to be very different because we both
Yeah.
have these whole conditional, like, who grew up, whose parents know, who grew up, whatever, there's like 1 million, you know what I mean?
Who wasn't supported,
Yeah,
whatever
as
the
a,
thing is.
yeah. Um, but so I guess speaking out of that, yeah, how do I say I'm thinking, how do I translate this thought I'm having? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it just seems like it's going back to what we were saying about identities being, you had a really good way of saying it. I don't remember the phrasing, but it was like coming out of the language of oppression and like what's the goal? Like what's being achieved? Like if the goal is like who is more oppressed, then I guess people can play that game. If that's the end
Right.
goal. But what's the goal of like trying to that's coming about? Like is the goal, what is the goal? Because I don't think that,
Well,
do
so
you know what I'm saying? I
there's
just,
like
yeah,
do
please go.
I can do it. I'm having this thought of like how people love, or there's like this I don't know if it's a saying or there's just like a thing, but people love to make friends with people who hate the same things as they do. It's easier to make friends with people who hate the same things as you do. And that's because it's just always easier to it's just always easier to be pessimistic. It is, especially now, especially in our government framework and in the US and like with our history. It's just easier to see the negative aspects because there are so many of them. Therefore, it's easier to connect with human beings through suffering than through joy, especially because the suffering is that it can feel so universal, whereas with joy for a lot of people that's like very specific, especially for people with like mental illness or people with trauma or people with, you know, whatever whatever blinders they might be wearing, like I as a if I was a white supremacist, my joy would look very different from like a black person in the South than like a white supremacist in the South, right? So then it's like how do you unite them over anything but a mutual dislike or like a common denominator that isn't an ideology or some sort of joyful like seed to plant. Because that's the other thing is I think suffering is instant gratification, whereas joy is often a seed planted
Totally.
that you don't really get to see until it happens, and then you're like, oh, now I see that like that joy was derived from this thing that I had to work for within myself. Like I especially, like I said, I was at some theater. I think it was at an RLT like play day. It was like our first one since COVID happened, and I said something about how I've been like finding my joy within myself. Like I've had to, and like it's been really hard because I've just been basically bedridden since December or like very late November. So, and that's like very new for me, and I hate it. But it's also forced me to like find anything, literally anything, to like be happy about, because everything else I was doing before that brought me joy I can no longer do. Like I can barely like go on a drive, like a joy, because it just hurts so much. So like I'm just in bed. What am I doing? I'm like on my phone. I'm doom scrolling on Facebook and all the social media and like doing whatever. And it just feels so bad. I had to be like, okay, well what can I do, or like what brings me joy? And it has to be from within myself, or like something that I can easily do, or that I already have that is tangible. And not a lot of people I think like have to do that. That's the thing about, you know, the mainstream, or like the perceived mainstream, and like the perceived norm, or like baseline, is that it's coming from a place of like assuming that outside things are going to work for you, and not that you have to work around or with them. Like, and that is the whole, like, especially, oh my god, and how society has gone, like, white people just ruining nature, literally just destroying the environment, like, makes this so hard because they've made us, like, we as a race, or like as a species, have become dependent on outside things to function, to feel joy, to feel connected. And as that goes on, it becomes harder to function just simply like as a being without
Because
those side of it.
outside things change. Like they're part of a conditional
Right.
world. Like, and I, oh my, yeah, I like, uh, to, to like grasp onto things outside of yourself. It's so funny because people, it's like kind of like what you're saying. Like you grasp something outside of you, and you're like, oh, that thing makes me happy. But that thing doesn't make you happy. You are making you happy. That thing is just like the outer resonance of what's happening inside. You know what I mean? So this feeling that I feel like a lot of people have, that like drives capitalism and drives like a lot of human experience, which is like the idea of scarcity, where you're like, that thing that I like, I no longer have, and now I feel a lack, and now I feel like I need to go out and replace it with something else. But that thing has never really been there. Like what you've been experiencing isn't that thing. You've been experiencing it yourself. Like you've been experiencing that own feeling. And something that I
Your
think that's,
connection to that thing.
yeah, you're experiencing your connection. And I think about like I've been thinking about pride, friend. You were talking about pride before, and it's so strange in a way. So there's this. I'm gonna try to use pride as an example. I don't know if this is gonna work. Things happen spontaneously, you know,
Mm,
like like pride comes from Stonewall, right? And that was not a planned situation. That was, but then that moment became such a moment, capital M moment,
right.
that
TM.
moment TM, that it kind of congealed in the past, and there's no room for the spontaneous pride.
Mm,
Now it's a constructed, congealed, let's repeat the same thing over and over again kind of situation.
right.
And so I think about that with objects, where it's like, wow, I feel this way towards this thing. And you can feel that and then let it go. But you can also be like, I feel this way towards this thing and I never want to let it go. I can't live without it. I need to hold on to it and grasp it and control it and like, make it my like little like thing or whatever. And I kind of feel that way with pride. Like, we have to hold on to this identity. And it's not that I don't like parades. Like I really loved going to Pride, but I also like grew up going to San Francisco Pride, which everyone knew was a party. Like the point
Mm,
of it was to be a party. Like it didn't matter. You didn't have to be gay. Like people weren't like, oh, I'm not gay. Like I'm not going to show up. It was like, oh, are you going to? It was like, oh, there's events happening all the time. Like, are you going to Pride? Like, oh, are you going to? It was like an event that was happening.
mm,
Even when I was like in high school, like it wasn't like. it was already like corporatized in a way there. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Like it was
it,
just an event that people in town knew was going to happen,
yeah,
and you either go or you don't. It's not like are you marching or like are you getting like it's just are you going?
yeah,
Because if you're not going, then you should.
right, yeah, or like, yeah, it was, yeah, I think that you would go to, and then like, it was definitely a different thing for like queer people versus non-queer people, I think. But
Right.
and there was a marching part. Like Dyke March was like where you went if you were a little bit more radical and like wanted to actually march in a less corporatized way. But then it started getting corporate anyway. But I think about this thing of like things happening spontaneously, like joy. Like joy, I'm so like moved by what you said earlier that like joy is really isolating. Like when you're
Yeah.
experiencing joy, it's like you're feeling an innate connection to something. Like you're feeling a connection, but it's like this way. Like you can't really connect this way. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And it's yeah, well, yes, and it's like people that like other this. I'm gonna stop saying I think because obviously these are all my thoughts. These um,
Okay.
um, but like that's why it's so hard to share joy and why other people can't. I think, mm, especially once it like if you can't connect this way, but it's also hard to go up. Like it's very one. It goes in one direction and it's like right in front of you and it's not very far. And so like when the upper class are like, oh my gosh, why can't you be happy for me that I like have enough money to buy these things or like that this that and the third, it's because like ow sorry um
You're fine.
it's because we can't experience that joy. It's only a lateral, it's like very short lateral direct movement, and so it can't go down just like ours can't go up. And like like someone getting a new car after you just totaled yours and can't afford one, like that sucks. Obviously you can be like, wow, I'm so happy for you, but like inside obviously you feel so shitty because you have no car.
Although that's getting into something that I think is really related to scarcity, which is like zeros. What is this term? Zero sum game? Zero sum? Something like that. Where it basically means that there's like a limited number of things in the world.
Oh, sorry.
There's
Is
a
it
really
really
funny
loud?
sound. Yeah, but it's
Well,
okay.
it's because it's like kind of broken,
Oh.
but it feels really good on my nerves.
I mean, it sounds like it feels really good. And honestly, when I'm talking, it minimizes the sound on your end, so it's not actually picking up like,
Coming through. Okay.
yeah. But I can also mute you or if you want or something
Yeah,
like that.
do
But
that.
okay. Only so can unmute themselves. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll just talk a little bit and then I'll unmute you, I guess. Um, wait, I have to remember what I was saying. Wait, oh my God, I can't unmute you. Only you can unmute you. I can only mute you, but I can't unmute you. I'm so sorry.
Just remember what we're gonna say.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? Zero sum game. Okay, so basically it's this theory that like, okay, this is my understanding of it. It's like there's only so many of things in the world. And so if ever anyone else gets something, then we experience a lack because it means that there's less for us or something. And so in some ways it makes sense. And in some ways it doesn't. Like in love, like, oh, you love that person. Now I feel rejected from not having that love. And it's like, well, that's not just because there's nothing less for you because of that. And so I think about like, yeah, I don't know why. It was coming up for me like, yeah, if someone else, what is that? Yeah, like what is that experience? And then also like feeling happy for someone else, like I don't know, it's like part of the like Brahma Viharas or something where you move from like metta or like loving kindness for yourself and then to compassion, which is kind of like acknowledging suffering and being like, wow, hello, I see you suffering, and then towards this, what is it, upekkha? Or no, I don't remember, but it's sympathetic joy. It's like feeling happy for someone else, even if they're doing something that you don't approve of. even if they're doing something just because they're feeling joy, it's like supporting someone else feeling joy. That's like really hard for me because I think I have so much judgment where I'm like, you shouldn't be enjoying that, or like, oh, okay, I see you enjoying that, but like I also see where it's going, and like just kind of like putting like inserting myself into someone else. But we did this like practice last semester on it, and I was like, okay, sometimes, very rarely, I can maybe put myself in a position where I can just be like, okay, you're experiencing joy and that's it. There's nothing even to derive from that. Because I think, I guess in my personal philosophy, I don't know, something I'm thinking about right now is like, if I make judgment calls on someone else, they're not because I want them to be better, because I see that the potential of is different, then when it comes time for them to need support to actually make the changes that might be better for them, they're not going to come talk to me. Like, I can't actually be helpful. If I'm just like sitting here and I'm like, you need to change these things, blah, blah, blah needs to go, like, blah, 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 and they're not like ready to hear that, then when they come time for them to be like, oh, wow, I'm like experiencing a change, like, I'm not going to be someone that they even find supportive. So I'm not really actually being supportive of that person at all. And so if I think from that perspective, I think like, okay, maybe the best support I could give someone is like sympathetic joy, even if I don't agree with what they're saying. It's like, oh my God, I just got blah blah blah. Like, oh my God, I just bought things, and it's like, okay, or like, or like, oh my God, I just like got back together with my ex. I'm like, okay, like what else do you do? I don't know. There's
So
the end of
like
my
that
rant.
actually brings up some because I I was talking to my therapist the other day, and I was talking to my mother today, and that obviously is a whole thing. Um, and I was thinking about how much of that is actually healthy. Sympathetic joy is like a little white lie almost emotionally, where it's like I'm happy or like or it's genuine. Then if taken too far, can be a lie, where it's like, okay, I'm happy for you, and like you don't need to know more than that. But also, this is a continued thing, then obviously you need to know that I don't approve of anything that you're doing. Like, depending on their relationship, how deep it is, how like what is happening at the time, like that will only help so much, or like could actually hurt a lot. Because if
That's
you're
like,
just no, go ahead. That was like pretty much done.
are you sure? That's like, that's like the thing that I feel like people come across in like we bring up a lot in like Buddhist studies classes all the time, and in a lot of things, is a difference between action and inaction. Like, there's a way that doing sympathetic joy is actually just a meditation practice. It's a meditation practice where it's you on your own imagining sympathetic joy and just how do like not that because it's absolutely good to do that, but because who do you become if you can have the capacity to feel that for someone else? Like, how does that change the way that you interact with people? But I feel like the conversation like Buddhism can just be so theoretical and so whatever or so I don't know that sometimes it's like, but what are you doing? Like, but what are you doing? And the action is like super important. Like to me, like thinking comes secondary. Like first experience your life. And then two, if you need help, then try applying a framework to it and like be thinking about it. Instead of trying to think and be like, well, if I do this X, Y, and Z, then like you know what I mean? Like you're not living. Like you're not living. Like what is the point? You know what I mean? So anyway, I think about this a lot too. Like where do I act? Like where am I true to myself? And I'm like, nope, like I don't approve. You know what I mean? Because there's like okay, so I feel like I want to like break it down just so I can like think about it in my own head. Like let's say someone says something And there's like two ways you could, there's two ways that, okay, maybe there's probably three ways, and the third one's probably right. Like you say. Like, let's say one way I could react is not responding and not saying anything, and just being like, ooh, okay, I don't agree, but I'm not going to say anything. And then another way I could react, I could choose to respond, right? Because response is always choosing, even if we have habituated, like whatever. You don't think that you can choose a different way of living, then it's that helpless, internalized fascist blah blah again. But like, okay, let's say my other choice is like, whoa, like I do not like that person for you. Like, and there's this thing that I see that comes out of both of those. Like if I'm quiet and I'm not really showing my emotion, then I get to let the other person exist. The other person's like, oh my God, I get to exist and be myself in front of you and there's no consequences. And then it's like the consequences they experience are on them on their own to change, and maybe they could bring it up later. So that's like a kind of positive thing, like, oh, I get to exist in front in around other people. And then if I speak up and I'm like, I don't like him, like, go take, don't be with him. I would, my opinion is don't be with him or whatever. Then I feel like, I don't know why it's him. Like, who is this fantasy friend in my mind who like has an ex-boyfriend? Like, I actually don't know who that would be. But anyway, then I feel like the positive thing about being true to myself and saying and expressing that instead of trying to hold it back is that that person now, like, they don't have, what I'm saying doesn't have to have an impact. Like, what I'm saying isn't, because I don't like this person and I don't think you should be together, that means that you cannot. Like, I don't have any power over this person's life. And so it also kind of helps the other person be like, okay, can I be myself even in facing, someone who doesn't like that person? You know what I mean? Because like if I'm gonna be like, I don't like that person for you, but I'm still gonna show up and support that person no matter what, even if it's in relation to that person, that seems like a kind of like a good option to me.
Well, so let's put it in like a real life, just because this fits the framework of this relationship so well. Like my mother, very good at putting herself in situations other people I think are not good for her. And
Mhm.
are very much putting other people in the hot seat at times. So there's there's a way to handle it where you just let it be until it becomes not an issue or she like does whatever she's going to do. Or there's the part where you confront her and it becomes like a big issue in which she is always the victim somehow. Or you choose to confront her in such a manner that you make it clear that like you're confronting her because that's how you feel, but she can do whatever she needs and like you're done after that. And so there's this thing where in any of those situations, inevitably it always comes up again, like no matter what. So what do you do when someone is, in a situation of like, getting back to, if someone is getting back together with like their shitty ex-boyfriend, I personally am not the kind of friend who's just gonna be like, yeah, that's, maybe you just need to like try again. No. No, that's a terrible choice because you know how it went the first time, and like I believe in second chances, but certainly with requirements. And I think also in my 24 years of lived experience, I find that in situations specifically like that where like someone is presenting you with the option or like the chance to give your opinion genuinely about something, like say it's like it has to be like a close relationship, right? Like this isn't just some random person being like, oh, what should I have for lunch today, and you're like, wow, you should have a bologna sandwich. Then they have a bologna sandwich and it's like the worst experience of their life, right? And then they're like, wow, fuck you. oh, you ruined my life. Like, yeah, if that does happen, that's like a very small, like, you're gonna forget that, or it'll be a really funny story. If someone is like, wow, should I get back together with this person? And you're like, you know what? I don't think so, but like, it's up to you. Follow your heart. Like, yeah, you can do that, but what do they actually get from it? If they asked you genuinely and you're not honest, there's no benefit because they're genuinely asking you as someone who's witnessed my life and me, as someone who, assuming it's a close relationship, like I said. So like, then why would you not tell the whole truth?
I feel like if you think that they can't handle it at that moment, if you know them really well and like they can't, I'm trying to imagine a scenario in which being honest, because I think sometimes I just default to being, I default to either hard extremes. Like I default to being like too honest, and then I default to being like no honesty, like very little honesty.
No,
And
I
I
straight
think,
up lie. Like, there have even been times where I'm like, you don't want to hear this, so I'm lying to you.
yeah, I feel like, right?
But like, I make the choice again. It's like that's making the choice though to know that like if it comes up again, I have to continue to lie because
uh,
that sort of the kind of person who I don't know. Like I'll lie if I think it's gonna work, but I do that knowing that like I'm gonna have to one commit, two understand that if I get found out, like that's it. Like whatever, suffer the consequences. But also just not lie. Like you can just tell the truth.
that's true. I mean, that's true too, because I think about what's the movement towards lying. Like the movement towards lying is sometimes, in my experience, mostly it's from a selfish position. It's a, I think I'm going to be disliked if I say the truth. I think I'm going to be left or rejected or abandoned or whatever if I tell the truth. And so me lying actually is my interest at stake. I think there's another like Confucian way of dealing with it where it's like what's the most appropriate thing for this moment with this person and being super particular about it. Like and then it's not and then it's about that person. It's like can this person handle my truth? What's the most like and then maybe even that the things that we have to say and be on or be sincere about isn't even our own personal opinion. Like I could have my opinion, but maybe the best thing to say in a moment isn't even my opinion. It's like what the moment calls for. I can't say I understand social dynamics enough to do that. I can barely like be honest in front of other people like that I don't know 100%. Yeah, but I was thinking about something that you said, um, where you were talking about second chances. And there's a part of me where I like don't think I believe in second chances because sometimes I think people choose to do things in a moment and if they're not thinking about the way that those actions affect other people and they're like oh wait give me another chance because the first time I just wasn't thinking about it I'm like no. That's like what you did, that's like what you chose to do in that moment and we already have like a groove now, like we already have our habituated patterns with each other, like we're not stepping in that river again, whatever, that's such a bad analogy because you never step in the same river twice but like but like why would we like I don't think I just there's a part of me that's like, you know what? I I like don't know if I really believe in I don't really know if I want if I think that it's like best for everyone to try to do like second chances. I'm kind of like, well, look, we kind of like got thrown into this moment with these conditions and then we made choices. And there's just no doing it over again. Like we're just going to end up in a new pot, in a new time with new conditions and hopefully maybe make a different change or something. You know what I mean?
Also, like I definitely get what you mean, and I think I approach it from this perspective of I am permitting the redo, but it's not. But therefore, it's like not a redo. Um, and the second chance is more on my part of like what am I doing to change my behavior, or like what have I done and how am I different from the previous situation. If I'm not any different, hell no, you're not getting another chance because it's going to be the fucking same. But like, if I'm different, there is a chance that the other person could also be different or understand themselves differently or understand differently. And so that's why I like all like requirements met or like permitted, I guess like a second chance possibility if you have the emotional maturity to approach it differently. Like I started talking to my dad again, but it's not because I was like, oh, I'm gonna give him another chance. It was because I reached a point in my life where I was like, I am deciding that I am different enough that I can make space. I can make a space for him that won't overwhelm me or demand too much of either of us, and like that I could sustain long term, and it looks like this. So if they want it, then you can like present it as right. A second chance is like a is like a I don't want to say a mold, but it's like how do I say this?
It kind of sounds like a second chance is actually like a choice, and that second doesn't mean last. It kind of
Right.
means next.
Yes. Yes. Because everything's a choice. So yeah, it's kind of like if there are choices made in which things can move forward, then like why not do that? I guess if it is beneficial to you.
That's like the action thing that we were saying. Like maybe the act of being silent is a choice too, but if that choice is being made out of like fear of rejection, then actually it's not really a choice. It's not, or maybe it is I mean, it's still a choice, but you're choosing to be helpless to fear.
Right. Yes. Well, and again, going back to like choosing to be helpless or like placing yourself in the role of a victim. Please don't come. I know what I'm trying to do. Um. um. One like um choosing okay, I guess one choosing to be helpless means that you're already coming from a place of privilege because you had a choice in the first place to not be helpless. um, and then also taking on the role of helplessness or victimhood is like really damaging for the psyche because it's doing pretty much everything a therapist would tell you not to do, such as like ruminating on like why you are so sad, depressed, oppressed, like can't fit in, why like being focused on things you can't actually change in the moment or have any tangible resources. Like these are all things that, at least for me in my personal experience, like really did fuck up my mental of like being stuck in that place of like outside world is X and I can't find my things inside of that. So like therefore I am worthless or like empty or whatever. What were we talking about? And why did I start talking about this?
Dude, I don't even know, but I love it.
Great. Yeah, just like high thoughts. Why do we exist? It's so we can undergird each other, basically, because like society really has come so far as to like be based in compassion, have someone experience violence, and now we're just experiencing mass violence. And there's like a desire for the next cycle of like love and communication being the basis of but like there's no it feels so hard because it's pictured as regression when in
Yeah.
fact we've already gone through this cycle several times of like I don't know how many like animal hunts animal, man kills man or whatever, like man, like how do you think the fucking food chain got to where it is? Like, how do you think evolution works? Like, what are we doing here? Why does science exist if we can't use it to apply like critical thinking to these sorts of things? And that like in our cycle we are reaching a point where there has to be like a one or the other, and we're either going to enter a time of like extreme violence, and I don't mean like but like like actual nuclear violence, or we're gonna tip back into the next cycle of like restoring health, peace, like and balance. Like hopefully balance, Jesus Christ somewhere in their balance, but like something has to happen because it's just we've gotten to the tipping point and like I don't know.
I feel like I see what you're saying completely. And I feel like, I mean, to an extent,
Especially because, and I actually I do want to say this because I just had, or not like just had, but like, as Jupiter moved into Aquarius, I was like having the end of my return, and it was like I didn't realize it until afterwards, but it was like an incredibly expansive time. And I really felt like I did a lot of work on myself and like my outlook and the things that I did all kind of made sense with like the energy that was happening. But also like right at the peak of the like my solar return and like some other things, just like everything collapsed because we're still in the process of death to then have the rebirth. So like this, I feel like we just went through like the expanding, like we went up, to use like a phoenix, I guess like that was the going up in flames. That was the expansion, like old age. We've reached like the edges of what we're capable of, or like that's where we're getting.
yeah.
So like, what is gonna come out of that is the question.
Okay. I got some theories.
Okay.
Maybe. So like I'm gonna like say what I think I understand back basically, which is that like we're at a point when we're no longer ignoring pain. We're saying there is pain and there's suffering in the world. And now that we're actually facing it, now we're also facing something in ourselves, which is like what are we going to do about pain? like like what are we going to do about feeling like suffering at the hands of others and knowing that we also create suffering for ourselves and for other people and stuff like that. And so like when you talk about the cycle, like I feel like people like big masses of people and individuals in all these different, levels come to this point where they're like, "Oh my God, pain." And then go into their same habituated patterns of what they do when they face pain, and so end up in the same cycles and have babies, and those babies experience it, and they come to the point where they're like, oh my God, pain. And they're like, oh well, I'll just do what my mom did and I'll just drink it away, and then like, well, and it's like the whole cycle again. I feel like this is gonna be a weird thing to say, but a way that I translate privilege sometimes is ease. Like if you have the privilege to do something, you have the ease of not having to think about it. Do you know what I mean? I think to an extent. And I think there's like little things that we wouldn't call privilege because there isn't a social like stratification about it, but that is totally an ease. You know what I mean? Like things like that are natural to us and also like maybe individual to different people. Like is breathing an ease for me? And then what are things that I can do that bring ease to me? And so I think like part of knowing like knowing that there's pain and suffering and confronting your own pain and suffering is thinking like, okay, where is my ease? Like what privileges do I have? Because I think part of having privilege is having responsibility. And there's another reason why I think that like people this might be a con what is the word controversial phrase, but I think that another reason why oppressive identities have a lot of social capital right now is because what a lot of, especially in the US, is that I think what a lot of Americans want is a type of freedom that's actually a freedom from responsibility, which is helplessness. And if you can align with identities that are deemed helpless by oppressive frameworks, then you don't actually have a responsibility to your own happiness and health because other people are making it bad for you. And so like what happens if you identify with your like what privileges do you have and how do you take responsibility of it? Like what adjacencies do you have that you can learn how to use? And I feel like if you if your life revolved around your ease and expanding that ease, then the pain would like have somewhere soft to land. That's my theory.
So then what is expanding ease? Because I totally vibe with that theory, and it's very like very much padded safety net comes to mind of like um some people start with like that really thin like gym mat or whatever. And then some people have that like super cush one that's like 6 feet or whatever, you know? And so it's like, where are you starting and where, you know, if the goal is to get to this cush, you know, like landing pad, what does it take to get there and who is holding you back from that? And who are you asking to help also? Because it's like if you are calling on helplessness to get you to ease, like that's not gonna work. Because being helpless isn't easy. Inherent fear and like struggle and survival. So like, why are you sitting in that when really you want to be focusing on like I guess the little you do have to like work to your advantage, but then also look like because if your advantages are that you know people with resources, but you yourself don't have access, that means that you rely on those people. So then what do you have within yourself other than what you've been using to survive thus far? Like I think that's like a wall that people hit and also some people struggle to get over. Is that like once you have once you have enough, you have to like you need to share. What's the point? Like once you have a safety net, why do you need more safety net? If all you're doing is jumping and you have this safety net and you never even need to land on it, right? Like what are you doing? And what is the point? And that's why I don't understand like celebrity or investing or like stock or business or anything like that is like why are you once you reach a certain point of of able to accumulate wealth, how why are you not reinvesting that into your actual community, because that's what's going to keep all your businesses up. First of all. Second of all, like like that's how capitalism works. It's crazy how people who identify as capitalists actually don't understand how capitalism works at all. But like what was I saying? The other part of that is I guess I don't want to say it, but like appropriation. At what point are you appropriating experience? Because like you said, wearing the trans label is different for everyone. Like wearing whatever identity you wear is going to be different for everyone. Wearing like a gay label is going to be different for everyone. So then, what is the assumed shared experience other than what's been projected in propaganda? Right? Like that's the other thing to think about. I guess is like, mm, yeah, it's like to use astrology, like Capricorns and Cancer is like the mom and dad of the zodiac, right? And Capricorns are known to be like hardworking and focused on money, and Cancer are homemakers, like are really emotional. But a lot of Cancers I know are so emotionally unintelligent. They
Yes.
cannot process their own emotions. They cannot deal with others' genuine emotion about them. Like they can't take criticism. They seek comfort, and when they make comfort, it's very specific. It's very like, I can do this for you, but if you don't want that, then like I don't know what to do. Um, and Capricorns I have found are like deeply emotionally intelligent, but they communicate is not like soft. So so it comes out as like I see you and I hear you, but like here's what it looks like on the outside. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to like deal with. So Capricorns get labeled as like hard asses when in reality it's just like it's like seeing what's happening and naming it and just like put it like naming it out loud. And that is hard for people. People like don't like that. Um so it's just interesting like these labels of being emotional or sensitive, like what does that mean? Like what is being sensitive or like emotional or masculine or being a hard ass, or like what is strong and what is like strength, and how do you measure that? And like what is actually important? Like strength is important, but if your body is strong and like emotionally and intelligent, like like mentally, you have nothing. What point? Because no one's gonna seek you out, and you're not gonna seek anyone out because you don't have the mentality to make those connections, right? Like if you are intelligent, this is the thing. Like nerd culture is what I don't get all the time, and it's this structure of like if you're intelligent, that means you're better than everyone else. But like once you reach a certain level of intelligence, you're just alone. Isn't that like so stupid and boring? Like that's not strength. That means you're alone and you can only do things alone. Everyone else is doing stuff without you. You have no idea what they're doing. You want to know, and that's why like people are so they're like, oh, I'm so left out. It's like no one's leaving you out. You're choosing to have behaviors or actions that keep you on the outside. And sometimes that's comfortable. Like I did that where I was like, I'm so this, or like um like I framed it as like I don't like how they're doing these things and it makes me uncomfortable, when in reality it's just that like that I don't vibe with that, but I don't want to seek out anyone else because it's easier to just mesh with whoever's around. So like maybe change your personality because you're willing to do that, or you don't and you find something else and put the work into finding something else, then you're ostracizing yourself. Like that's the reality, is that you made the choice to ostracize yourself. Maybe it didn't seem like that at the time, but that's where you end up.
Mm. Oh my God, there was so much in there. I could just like listen to you speak
I am
sometimes.
so glad we don't have a topic because I literally don't even know what we started talking
I,
about. I just
I know. Me too. I feel like whenever we talk, we're like, let's just say things and then it's like what I was saying before about trigger people, like people who just trigger things in you, like in a negative way. I feel like when we talk, you'll say something and I'll be like, oh, that reminds me of something that I also like, that reminds me of this rabbit hole I went down. And then I'll say something and you'll be like, oh, that reminds me of this rabbit hole that I've been down. Like, a want to share. I was thinking about like, okay, I wrote some notes down, so maybe I'll just like look at the notes. Okay, like so one thing on sharing wealth, like you were saying like once you get to a certain amount of wealth, like why aren't you sharing it? And I wonder this, and I wonder if people like if people who like end up with like secure, I don't even know if wealth is ever really secure. Do you know what I mean? To be honest, I think that, but anyway, um, I wonder about like what was the initial goal? Like, was the initial goal I want to hoard my wealth? I want to live in fear all the time that I could lose everything. I want to, or was the goal like, yo, I want to make enough that I can like share it with people, or I want to make enough to be able to do this thing, to do X. Yeah, I want to make enough to travel or something. And then you make enough to travel, and then you have all this left over, and you're like, wow, I guess I'll get another house. Like to me, I'm like, is there like, was it always just about you, or what did the folk? Did you just forget why you were making money? Because I know I can kind of fill into this reality because I think I do my jobs in order to get money, in order to do, I've like worked jobs where the goal of the job is for this thing. Like it's like the job isn't my life. The job is a means to get somewhere. Like, okay, job gives me money, and what I want to do with money is pay my bills, blah blah blah, invest in whatever over here, like invest in myself in this way. But then I'll start working the job, and then I'll be like, oh my God, this job, and then like that job becomes my life, and I totally lose focus on what I'm doing. And I'm wondering, like, do people feel that way with money? They're like, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm making like $100,000 a year. Oh my God. Like, look at all this money. Now I can do things I never had access to. But like, is that really fulfilling? I don't know. Anyway, I just wonder, is it like like, yeah, how do people get hoarding? I feel like they sense a
Right. Well,
lack.
also like,
Yeah.
so something I've been wondering specifically is like, why is hoarding wealth not seen as hoarding? Like these people aren't being treated for hoarding as a poor person would for like hoarding magazines or whatever resources they can get their hands on, right? Like panic buying. When regular like working class civilians panic buy, that's like a thing, and it's there. It's like there's a whole. But like I don't know what do rich people panic buy? Real estate, like stocks and bonds. Like that's like how people in the Senate, people in the government like panic sold all their stock before the stock market crashed. Like why is that not why is that not oh, what's that post that's going around on Facebook? Things that are classy when you're rich but like ghetto when you're poor or whatever. Like literally anything to do with money or like not having money or scrambling to make money. Like when you're rich or when you have excess. When you have excess, whatever you choose to do with that, like if it's just to reinvest in yourself, is like selfish, right? Like if I am a farmer and I have excess food, it would be selfish of me, in my opinion, if I'm doing well, right? Like and I'm all my everything's fine, I'm doing the things I like and I'm living life comfortably. It's wrong of me to like go somewhere else and sell those goods when I could give them to people literally in my neighborhood for free. But that's what people do all the time is they choose like that's literally how our food system works is people choose to invest in shipping things so that they can make the profit or like going like I just want to know. I wish I was a historian or whatever one of those other things jobs is where you like look into the past of like when because I understand like going to a trade market or like if you were in a tribe and like you don't have stuff like your hunting didn't go well or like something important you just don't have so you need to go somewhere and like trade something. Right, that makes sense. That's why you have excess. That's why you hope for excess and things is because those are bartering tools. Now excess is just extra shit because capital is what gets you those things. So if you have extra capital, that means you have excess you literally have just like access to anything. Once you have excess capital, you are essentially like a god in the United States society structure. You can do whatever you want because you can get whatever resources you want. And especially if you have enough money to pay people to do the work for you, you literally can have an idea, shell out a few $1 million, and have someone carry it out for you, put your name on it, and make more money. That's absolutely insane. That's so stupid. That's so terrible. That you can you can underpay people like oh, it's just so stupid. And it's like how like that is just the curse of society in my opinion. Just like the such intense greed and like lust for things that we can't have, right? Like rich people love child porn and they sex traffic people all the time. Like sex trafficking is not cheap. That's something that like people really need to understand is like whatever little suburban house Karen or like house Susan, white women in their like 50s to 70s who are like, wow, child trafficking, like this is why porn is bad or like, like whatever. Who's paying for that? Do you know how much it fucking costs to ship a human across oceans, let alone across like, you know what I mean? Like sending a person across state lines even is thousands of dollars. Do you know how hard it is to get that kind of money? Like you can't just do that. Who do you think is funding these things? Like how how do you make people aware of the actual reality when they refuse to look outside the framework? Like they don't, and it's also like a situation they don't actually care about. Like a lot of the stuff in the news is stuff that people don't genuinely care about or even understand. But it's in the news, and the news is something they've been told is like something they should listen to. That keeps them up to date. So that means that if it's in the news, they should have an opinion because that's what's happening in society. That's not true. Like if you don't know anything about it, don't have. Of course, you shouldn't have an opinion. Of course, if you don't know anything about it, of course you won't have an opinion. You simply could not because you don't know anything about it. So why are you saying anything? And like just because you hear something doesn't mean and it relates to you doesn't mean that you actually relate to it. Like that's the other thing is when people see their identity in the news, they're like, "Oh, I must say something about this," but that's not always true because it's not about you actually. Yeah. So I just want to come. I like to come and look at these notes
Oh,
because I do want to talk about the trans femme thing. This is just like an unpopular opinion that I've had for a while that I've
go
talked to
for
some
it.
people about. And feel free to unmute and like respond as you want. I feel like we've talked about this before though. Is that like there's this thing within the quilt bag community where being femme and feminine are like the peak. That's like the ideal. No matter how you identify. And I understand, I guess, seeing that in like if queer is the third option of like a patriarchal society, I get that. But at the same time, what does that look like? And like why kind of just like taking a look at why things are the way they are. And how like how do I want to say this? How dykes and he him lesbians have more of a standing in the community than trans men simply because they're still like femme. I don't want to say like women, but like femme. Um, and like a lot of trans men in the community I see, like to pass, you have to just give up femininity. But if you're a non-binary person who's AMAB, like oh my god, if you wear makeup, that's like just the most gender bent thing in the world, and that's like, wow, look at you like breaking the like barrier and like whatever. But if a trans man wears makeup, that's like he has to struggle with his identity both within himself and within the community, or like they have to, I feel like it just takes a lot. Like it feels like it takes a lot more. And for some reason, it's like obviously, I mean, society has connected these things to femininity. So there's that. But it's also the within the community being like, why, like, who are you to judge me? And why is it okay for, why is it more okay for things to be binary within the community than it is for things to actually be queer? Like why do we still like have these boxes? And there I watch so many fucking panel discussions. I watch so many, and I don't know why. I mean, I do. It's because I just like to hear people's opinions and thoughts and talk. Like I don't know why I watch some of them because they're so annoying. And so I watched this one. There's this trans person who was like, I, as a trans person, feel like to be trans, you have to identify as like, and like obviously they were someone who was, I shouldn't say obviously, they were someone who was using somewhat outdated language to like make their point. So they were like, to be trans, you have to be a transsexual. Like non-binary people aren't trans because they like identify in a way that means they want hormones and surgery to transition into a different gender.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, I hear you, but also what you don't hear is you yourself like pushing societal structures onto someone that you are forced to follow to identify the way that you do. Like, it's like someone who doesn't know the history but still wears the identity. What do you do with that? Of like you getting surgery, but like the only reason that exists really is because probably someone was like, I don't identify this way and I'd like to be considered a woman, and someone was like, well, guess what? Guess you have to chop your dick off then because we don't like that shit. And they said, okay, to live my life the way I want to, I guess I will do that. And then eventually someone was, actually, this is inhumane and I would like us to fix this into something that actually benefits me. Like, I would love the facts on this. This probably isn't true, but like, it feels true because once upon a time, everything we use to derive pleasure from now was like a torture device. So, who are you to tell me that I'm wrong? Um, but yeah, no, just this interesting thing where like once you become a trans man, like your articles, like yes, I got privilege. This is my things I notice now that I'm perceived as like a passing man, and I'm like, okay, most of these are by white trans men, so there's one. Second of all, if you pass, that's a whole different thing. Third of all, what if you pass but you don't identify as trans, but you're being read as a binary? Like, that sucks that everyone's now putting you in a box just because you look a certain way. And then if you do one thing, that automatically takes away that any form of that title scenario. Like, that's just really frustrating. Like, how do you work within these things? And also, how do you do that without idolizing people? So, like, we idolize the trans women right now because, like, yes, they need the support, but what does support actually look like? I think white supremacy has trained people into supporting by just being a bystander and being like, oh, you're doing great. Like, looks, like, they don't, there's no thought. Like, society now has been formed without thought. We have been conditioned to be thoughtless. It's like really scary to say out loud, especially because literally all the literature in history has been like, the government is training us to be thoughtless. Like, watch out for that. And everyone's like, wow, that's so imaginative. That would never be us. Like, please, 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 Lord. Um, but yeah, how do you do that without idolizing people? Because then you create structures in which like people don't feel safe calling someone out because oh they're trans, and I don't want to call them out because then I'm gonna be a transphobe or people are gonna call me misogynistic or like whatever. Or you have an altercation with someone and then it can, and it's like to the point where the mainstream realizes it and it can now be weaponized where like there are abusers who abuse people and then try to like be non-binary or present more feminine, and that gives them a softer image and they're allowed to get away with more, but no one questions it because like how, who are you to question someone's identity, especially a trans femme person, because it's so hard for them to like do it. And like I would understand that if we were in the Midwest, but literally I'm in Northampton, so like nothing nothing is happening here. So like why are people like this? And it's because it's easy for them. It is ease. It's easier for people to be like, wow, well, because like, I was gonna call them out, but like I didn't know that they were struggling with so much. So like I can't put more on them by calling them an abuser. Like that would be too much. No, it wouldn't. Like stop. What? Or it also stops from people from getting the help they need. Ari, I was like, the issue isn't that you're trans. The issue is that you are clearly not getting help that you need, and you don't have it in you to be like functioning in society the way you are pretending to function right now. And like and I can't help you. Like that's that. I probably shouldn't have said it. Like, um, it's one of those things where it's like I couldn't do anything because I knew that the issue was going to be like, oh, a problem with me because of like this identity and this and that. And it's like that's not true. The problem I have is that your behaviors are just outlandish.
I feel like identity is like at at the bottom of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, how do I even? I wish I could just like break everything. break everything down, but like and it's also this like feeling, this like construction of identity
Hmm.
that somehow, I think I've written about this before. I'm not sure if I shared it with you, but there's this like absolutist kind of binary construction of identity where, well, because I'm part of an oppressive group, I cannot be an abuser. And
Yeah.
that's just like not, where do you think abusers come from?
Right.
Like, where do you think bullies came from? Like, bullies were bullied.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind
Right.
of
And
in,
so that's my
yeah.
question though is like that's a widely accepted truth in society, but at the same time, like everyone is shocked when bullies are mean and when kids become bullies because they you know what I mean? Like it's like boys will be boys. They're like, "Oh, everyone knows that like men are like so why are you surprised when there's so much like abuse and terror from men and why do you do nothing about it? Like, why are you accepting one thing and also accepting the other and not seeing the like purposely not naming the correlation and supporting that? Because that's not within the best. Like, I just don't understand at what point did it become not within our interest to like heal other humans or like continue life that way? Because if like if life is just suffering, who wants that?
I think life definitely is suffering because we're mortal and we have things like time, and time does stuff like aging and blah blah blah. And I also don't think suffering is the only thing. And I also like think that I think of like the suburban, you were talking about suburban Karen, and suburban Karen who reads the news and then is taught by the news about what's right and wrong, and then can say, oh well, I'm deriving an opinion, but actually I'm just echoing what the newspaper is saying, and to actually conform to create an identity in which I align with the good side. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
this is also like, so I read this book. Well, actually, it's a couple of essays by Toni Morrison, and she's talking of she's basically, she read, it's like talking about two or three different books, and it's basically like it's almost like academic essays that she's written on these books, and all of these books that she's reading were written in like the early like 1700s in the United States by white people that feature black characters. And she's looking at them and being like, what's happening? Like, what are black people to white people at this time? Like, what is the narrative that
Right.
people need? And I think in the introduction, she's kind of talking about how, like, the United States, the construction of the United States, like, could not have could not be so focused on freedom if there was not slavery. Because what
Right.
slavery did for white people was constantly remind them that they are free in the face. And I think that's why I feel like that's echoed in why people are the way they are. Like when people say, I hate that, that's bad. It's actually them saying, I'm good, and and
Mm-hmm.
and being like, oh, that thing out there, that's not me. There's like this kind of like super binary othering in order to create an identity, you know. Oh,
Yeah.
that's bad, and so now everyone knows that I'm good because I think the right thing is wrong, and it's right to think that that's wrong, and so now I'm like the good person or whatever. And so I feel like this is the same way with like, wait, where was I going? Round. Um, wait, where were you? Oh yeah, like white carrying the suburbs and just like creating identity that's based on this like really old puritanist like like slave owner mentality. I think sorry, that's like what suburban Karen needs, is to experience to see the bad things that are out there that actually
Mm-hmm.
like there's no experience, but to say like, oh, okay, if I say, child trafficking is bad, and I'll send my kids to a good school, And it's like the narrative has changed, like now, like suburban Karen wants to say like, oh yes, like in this home, everyone is welcome, but it's still like participating in big systems that systematically oppress everyone that white Karen is that suburban Karen is talking about. There's just like a weird way that like people are really rooted in these like Puritan binarism. I think is like really what it is. And
Like,
mhm.
can I just something is that I'm surprised that with with that focus there's no interest in like the work, like to be bad or good, and to just because yeah, a suburban Karen these days would want to have the image of like everyone is welcome here and like whatever, but then obviously their own issues under the surface. But like 50 years ago, it was totally fine to be like, yeah, we everyone's welcome except black people and like anyone who looks ethnic and anyone who's like a slut or like liberated in any way. And that was also fine. So like what has actually changed? Is it just the language of the person? And how has language changed and become weaponized? And how do people wield it? Because like these same like hasn't changed that much. It's just what people say or how they phrase it is like different.
I totally agree. It's also been very interesting to see. I think the first time I experienced it was when I went to high school, where I was going to, before I had just been in school in the city, and then I went to high school in the suburbs. And all of a sudden, we were learning all of these, academic phrases about
Mm-hmm.
social, I was learning where, like, I knew, like, the, whatever. I was just learning all these words, about patriarchy and systems of oppression and I can't heteronormativity and like da da da. But all of the words that I was learning were words that were being applied.
Yes.
And
Somewhere
my
else.
head, yeah, my headphones are gonna die soon. But
Okay.
and it actually made me super removed from the people because now I had this language that was the filter, the academic filter through which I was seeing the people that I grew up with. And it removed me. And so now I had this academic, you know, I was always so frustrated with academia because it was like, oh, let's like talk about like systems of oppression and blah blah blah. And I'm like, but like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Like, are we unlearning anything, or are we just like trying to name something so we
Right.
can control it, which is the same thing that people are doing just before the things were named? Like, it's not like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we're talking in circles.
Yeah, but we're probably saying
Circles, but like
something.
we're definitely saying something. I feel like we're not talking in circles. It
No,
it's
no, no.
getting to that point where I'm like it's I just feel like I could say a lot about it, but it all comes to the point of like what is humanity and like why are we the way we are right now and like how to apply like love, I guess, or like graciousness to community rather than like capital and expectation.
I think it makes sense that that's where we are because that's what we're really
Mm-hmm.
talking about. Like we can point at all these things, but we're pointing with the language that we're trying to critique.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That's like what our tool
Yeah.
is like the same systems of oppression that we're trying to you know what I mean? Because language is a huge tool of coercion and control and mind training, really.
Yeah.
I think that like
Absolutely.
yeah, what is at the bottom is like people's like nature, and then there's all the conditional. But we have to like I don't know, like my teacher tells me a lot, like there's the inner world and then there's the conditional world. And the inner world you can change because it's in your control, and actually you're the only one who's responsible for it. You're the only one who's responsible for your actions. You're the only one who can do that. And so if you want to change your framework of how you want to look at the world, like it's up to you. At any moment you can do that. You know, it's like I've trained myself for so long to think, I'm worthless or helpless or whatever. But I can train myself out of that. The conditional world is going to take a lot more time to change than
Yeah.
myself. And so it's important that I do that. But I think I have to like change myself, you know, and um and then know that what I'm working on in the conditional world is going to take a long time. And it's not going to be
Right.
instant. But I can
But
control my reaction to the conditional world and be like the conditional world doesn't have language or doesn't have this or that or has a lot of suffering or has a lot of blah blah blah, but how do I want to react to that? What's the way that I want to relate to a world that it is as it is while I'm working to maybe change it or transform it in a way that is more aligned to, I don't know, like less capitalist. I don't know.
well, that I feel like it's the because you have control of the it's conditional and inner. Because you have control of the inner can then navigate the changes of the conditional. Because you can change yourself to adapt as you see fit. Um
Yes.
I can but I think part of it is like for some people the for people who like control, the pleasure of controlling the inner is not enough, or the lack of control with the inner uh, presents as desire to control the conditional, which one cannot do.
I guess there's something, yeah, I feel like in order to battle that or, battle that control is like, I mean, maybe even controlling the inner is not the best way of saying it. Maybe there is no control really. Maybe you just have
Oh,
to
like
take
accept
response.
it.
Yeah, maybe it's like that. Maybe it's like, okay, this is the way that I am. This is who I want to be. How do I take action to
Oh, did your headphones die? Well, I would keep talking to fill his space. Something to say.